Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of the Predator 224 engine build. I've got some parts here I want to show you. Now this is the EC Pinnacle 3.353 rod that I've got to work with this combination. Now the part number, it's 8281 is the part number. I'll have it, it's in the description of the part 1 video. You do get the insert bearings with it. I ordered an extra set because I always do, but I think it was $79.95. If you're building a stock class engine or you want to use a stock rod, this is that Wildcat connecting rod, and I've got the part number for that in the description of part 1 too. And it's a good looking rod. It really is. It's got that extended dipper. I would probably nip a little bit off or grind some off of that if I was going to run it, but it is the correct pin size for the flat top piston that we're going to be using in this billet rod build. So it's up to you, whichever one that you choose to run. And yeah, this is just a reminder, guys, when you put your rod cap on, make sure it doesn't look like this. That won't oil, and I'm not even sure it would go around in the block, but just put your rod cap on correctly. And I don't know anybody that's done that, but just a friendly reminder. And it should look like this. Yeah. Now this one is the stock Predator rod that comes in the 224. It's not a bad looking rod. And it as compared to the Wildcat stock rod, it's pretty similar. Now there are a few features that are different. Now the Wildcat has a smaller pin. It's a 709 thousandths wrist pin, so it works with that flat top piston. And of course we learned last week that the Predator rod won't. The chamfer up here at the top, the oil hole next to the wrist pin, has got more chamfer. It looks good. And also, they've got a deeper chamfer down here at the oil hole at the crank too. So quality part, and $6.99, like $7. So, if you got to run a stock rod for your class, it's a good choice. Now, when I mentioned grinding some off the bottom of that dipper, I want you guys to look at the EC, the billet rod. Look at the difference in the length of those dippers. So, if you take off 1/4 of an inch off the stock rod dipper, I don't think you're going to be hurting yourself. Some people are worried about trimming their dipper, but I think it'll be plenty. Still, you can trim some off and it'll still be plenty long to reach the oil in the pan. Now, this is the Predator flat top, the Predator dish top piston and the Predator rod. Now, I had forgot to do this last week, and so I was going to get it, try to get it in this week to measure the distance on the pop up or down hole. And in order to do this, I've got to just kind of put the rod on and piston. There's no rings on the piston. Just slide the rod and piston down the hole and connect them up to the crank there. And you guys are pretty much know the drill. When you're test fitting and measuring for building these engines and working on them, a lot of times you'll take them apart, put them together, take it apart, put it together, take it apart. So many times you feel like you're going to wear the threads out on the bolts. But that's just part of it. You've got to get all those measurements in, and you got to make sure it's right. Now the first rod that I ordered for this thing was wrong, and that's why I haven't mentioned the part number or anything. And I had originally bought that rod, and according to my math, if it had worked out like I thought it was going to, with the piston I was going to use and the original billet rod, it should have left me around 15 to 17 thousandths down in the hole. So that means the piston, needed to come up about 15 to 17 thousandths. And I was going to use a 10 thousandths thick head gasket. Now that would have given me well, let's see. A lot of people calls it squish. It's called quench. The chainsaw guys call it squish, but it's just the distance between the top of your piston and the bottom of the head. So, you know, I was aiming for around 25 to 27 thousandths with that build, and that rod was really, really wrong. So it did not work out. It was way down the hole. So I don't even talk about it. I'm not going to mention the part number. It was a ARC rod, but you know, I think I probably got my math wrong. You know, I don't know. This was a different stroke crank, and it was a different piston design. So you know, it might have been on me, but when you're fitting this thing, you know, you guys, you don't have to snug it up, you know, factory torque specs. Just tighten the bolt down, because we're not going to run this. You know, we're just checking our how much pop up or down the hole the piston is. And yeah, I should have got this in last week, but I didn't, and I wanted to go ahead and get this in for the guys that are going to be running the stock Predator dish piston and the stock rod, because you know you need to know. You need to know. And all I'm doing here, guys, I'm just taking a little of this oil off the side cover and rubbing it on the gasket, because that gasket was kind of sticky last time. I had to peel it off with a screwdriver, and I don't want it sticking back on there again, because, you know, hey man, a couple of bucks, you try to save what you can. And if I don't have to replace the side gasket, well, you know, I don't really want to. So put a little oil on the seal too there, so it'll be going off and on several more times before this engine's finally finished. And just, I'm going to put a couple of bolts in, you know, just snug them down so it holds the side cover in place good, supports the crankshaft, so we can get a accurate reading on our deck height for the piston there. And you got to remember, you know, when you take your measurements, you need that side cover in place, because it can make it, and usually it will make a difference. You can lose a few thousandths on your the piston pop up or the deck height. Now this gas tank has been not really in the way, but it's got to go now, because I'm fixing to remove this governor out of here. We're not really going to need that thing anymore. I'm going to go with this EC forged rod with the insert bearing, and we're going to put that 265 bonsai cam in here, and you know, with 26-pound springs. So I'm going to be turning a few more RPMs, and I don't really, you know, you can leave that plastic governor gear and stuff in there, lever if you want, but I'm not comfortable with extra stuff floating around inside the engine, especially if it's something you're going to turn up at, you know 7,000-8,000 RPM, and that's probably all this one is going to do. Not really, you know, building a racer or anything. I just want to beef it up to where it can turn some RPM and still stay together. And I think that's a good most guys probably want, you know, same combination. And these gas tanks, if you hadn't taken one off before, I know most of you guys watching probably already have, but if you haven't taken one off before, it's just, you know, bolt in the back, a couple of bolts up front, and I think these are 10 millimeter. Really easy, just lifts right off. And let me get my emission system here. Okay, we'll set this off to the side. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to get this thing up on top dead center. And top dead center, you know, I'm rocking the flywheel back and forth, because when that piston gets up to the top, there's a little section of dwell there that it gets to. Well, I can already tell it's not coming up to the top of the block. So it's going to be below the deck. Now what I've got here, I've got a little piece of excuse me, it's not cast iron, but a little piece of angle iron that it's fairly straight, and I know the thickness on this, so I can gauge that, and then I'll take and measure the thickness here and subtract. And what I come up with is the stock Predator piston and rod are 3/1000ths down the hole. So that piston lacks 3/1000ths from coming up to the top of the bore. And so, you know, if you want to run a quench of, you know, 30 to 35, then you'll probably want to have around the, you know, 35 head gasket if you can locate one. I think you can get one, a copper one from Dyno Cams has got them, 32 to 35. You could run the stock head gasket, 45, 55. Now this is something that I thought was kind of funny. I was getting ready to pop this flywheel loose, and I thought, well, what the heck? It wouldn't, my wrench wouldn't stay on there. It's like, what the heck? And as it turned out, that flywheel nut wasn't tight, guys. It was, you know, you guys see how much I hit it there. Okay, it was barely snugged up to the flywheel. Now I had ran this engine stock before I disassembled it, of course, and that flywheel nut was not tight. But now here's, you know, some guys use the pullers and stuff. This is what I do. Okay, I just put a little pressure in behind the flywheel and then put the nut on there and then tap it. And the way that came off, man, I don't even think I even had to put anything behind the flywheel. It was loose. That's a wonder I didn't mess up the taper, but no longer than I ran it. You know, I guess it turned out okay. And I want to get this flywheel key out of here. I'm not going to be putting that back in, by the way. But I just use these little old flush cutter pliers. That's for electrical work and wire cutting, but it works good for that. This is the flywheel I'm going to go with. This is the cast aluminum flywheels. It's got the good magnets. And these are rated, they're not billet, but they're rated up to 8,500 RPM. And that's fine. That's I won't have any need for anything to go over that. And I don't think I listed those in the part 1. I'll probably list that in the part 2. I got those at EC Carburetors down there in Dixon, Tennessee. And if memory serves me, I think it was $39.95. But, you know, it just depends on what you're going to use for your application. If you're going to be turning a lot of RPM, you know, you might want to go with the billet, and, you know, you spend around $100 or so. But this is going to be plenty fine for me for what I'm going to do. And I've got the measurement now. I'm going to pull this rod back out of here, and you guys, you know the drill. And yeah, we'll just cut to the victory shot here. And out she comes. Not a bad looking crank. I don't think it's heat treated. It seems like it's a little soft. I scratched on it a little bit on the counterweights, and I don't think it's heat treated, guys. I really don't. That's why normally, you know, I'll go with like on the flatheads when I would build those with a good hard crank, it would be 20 to 25 on my quench. But with this one, man, I think I'm going to go 35 or maybe a little bit more because that crank is bound to flex. I'm going to get rid of this governor. First, I get this top lever out of here. That's a 10mm bolt. I'm just going to loosen that up a little bit and spread that linkage apart with a flat tip screwdriver. Should pop right off. Come on. Wiggle, wiggle. There we go. Now some guys leave this shaft in here, but I'm going to go ahead and take mine out because the only thing holding it in place is this. Yeah, see that? It fell down inside the engine. The only thing that's holding that in place is that little clip. And man, you know, I just don't really trust that little clip to keep that from falling down and throwing a monkey wrench in my rod and piston. And I'm going to pull this plastic governor gear out of here. The way that thing is held inside, it's got a little old clip down in there. And I'm looking at the shaft here because I already know what the deal is. This governor has got a little retainer. It's really a lock ring is what it is. It's not any kind of clip. It's a lock ring. And to get that thing out is, I don't know, man, it's beyond me. I don't know if you can get it out on the inside of the engine. Oh, sorry guys, this is so bright. Man, that shows up. Looks like when they opened up the doors to the spaceship on Close Encounters of the Third Kind on the camera. But it's not that bright when I was looking at it. But yeah, that little clip, man, I just can't get it out. So the only way I know to do is I'll take it and drive that shaft out. And yeah, this is not the right tool for the job, but you know, about anything, you know, if you've got a punch handy, fine. That's really what I should have done, but I just grabbed what was handy. And there's that little lock ring. And I'm going to use side cutter, those little flush cutter pliers because they're sharp. The little governor gear, goodbye. And even with these little flush cutter pliers, and they're really sharp and easy to get hold of small stuff, it was really a pain to get out of that groove, but I got him. There's the little rascal that was holding the little plastic gear in. Goodbye. Oh yeah, don't forget, there's a little thin metal washer underneath that plastic gear. And it's usually stuck to the case there, so you got to kind of fish it out with a screwdriver or something. They ought to have this game at the county fair. And here you go. Now, after we got everything disassembled, now we can drive the pin back in. And, you know, just start him straight, guys. And you just want to get it close to being flush there. You know, you don't want that sticking out and rubbing up against your flywheel or anything. So just run him down there flush or about flush. And there's our little lever that fell down inside. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take, this is just a 1/4-20 bolt, standard American thread. And I'm going to run that down with some, I've got some gasket sealer here. Now you can use silicone or whatever you want to use. I use like Forma gaskets, this really black, thick stuff. And it's not as soft as silicone when it hardens. It's kind of like a tarry texture. But I found on these holes, you know, I've seen a lot of guys do different ways, and that's fine. Everybody's got his own way. Well, what I like to do is just use a 1/4-20 bolt, about, you know, 3/4 of an inch long, and put that sealant on there and just thread it down into the hole. The bolt is big enough. It's smaller than the hole, but you can catch, you know, you can cut some threads going in. And any aluminum particles that might come out. You know, they'll fall straight down, so you can just blow them right out of the block or wipe them out. But you know, to me, you know, this seems like, you know, a better idea, a better way to plug this off rather than maybe sticking a nut and a bolt on the inside. Again, I don't like things, you know, possibility of things falling on my piston and rod while it's rotating in there. Yeah, there it is. Problem solved. Now this is the flat top piston part number, and that's in the description of part 1. Now, since I'm just going to be test fitting this for right now, I'm going to check the deck height on this piston and rod combo. I'm not going to install the wrist pins. Yet. And on these EC rods, guys, a lot of times, well, the ARC I think is that way too. You need a 12-point quarter-inch socket. And these dudes do come with washers on there. Make sure you don't lose your washers. Those are really important to get a good, accurate torque reading. And I know a lot of you guys have already installed insert bearings on these rods. Some guys haven't though. So if you've not, just make sure you line up. There's a tab on the back of the insert bearing, and there's a recess in the rod and the rod cap that the tab fits into. Just line those up, and you want to make sure your oil hole in the insert is lined up with the oil hole on the rod. You know, if it's off a little bit, you can use a die grinder or a Dremel tool or something, or even a drill bit to drill the hole out or angle it a little bit to line them up. But that's real important. And again, there's the recess and there's the tab, and just pop them right down in place. Now, different manufacturers will have different recommendations of how they want you to pre-assemble and pre-torque the rod bolts for their rods, and that's important. You know, follow the manufacturer's recommendations. Now, when I do this, I like to torque my rod and bearing on the crankshaft. Now, I've seen, you know, guys do it in vices and stuff, and, you know, if that's the way they want to do it, that's fine by me. But now I prefer to do it this way, because when you crush that bearing, it needs to be against the rounded surface that it's going to be fitting up against. If not, you'll get like an out of round. Your bearing will crush and be kind of like egg shaped, in my opinion. So when I do this, the initial torque down of the rod bolts onto the rod, I'll place those on the crank and do it that way. And this is something also you want to do anyway, especially if you're blueprinting. You want to check and make sure your how much clearance you got on your rod and crank, and you want to check and make sure it rotates and stuff too. Check the side-to-side clearance and whatever specs you're shooting for. You know, as long as you got a little side-to-side, you're okay. Main thing, boy, those counterweights are close to that piston. Main thing, make sure that after you install the rod, it goes all the way around, and you've got a little movement left and right so it can line itself in the bore. Here I'm just checking out some different areas on this bearing. And this one is not torqued down. So you see I'm showing 85 thousandths at one point. Well, it's actually just according to my gauge. what I'm looking at is 82 on one side and 85 on the other. So that bearing is oblong until you torque it to 150 inch-pounds on this one. But again, you know, follow your manufacturer's specs on the rod. Whatever they want you to do, you know, it'd be a good idea. Follow their instructions. Now, when you install your piston, make sure your arrow is pointed down. And this is kind of a challenge to get it over here to where you guys can see. I know you can't see anything, and I apologize for that. I'll try to get some better lighting. But now this is not going to be a complete assembly right here. I'm just wanting to connect the piston into the rod, to the crank, and bolt them up to where I can check clearances. And first thing, well, not going to clear our low oil shutdown unit there, so that's got to go. I really hate that too, because I like having those as a precaution. You know, I don't tend to run my engines out of oil, but you know, with these clones, you never know. You know, sometimes a side cover bolt can come loose and you can drip some oil and not even realize it. So having a low oil shutdown is a good idea, but yep, that's going to be one of the things has to go to keep the forged rod with the insert bearing, and I'm willing to make the sacrifice. Okay, what am I doing now? I don't know. Oh, try to put some light in here. You guys can see this. There's only a couple of bolts holding that low oil shutdown unit in place in there. Get that out, and let's see, I've got to get the where it comes through the side of the block over here, and that is a 14 millimeter, and that was loose. that wasn't even tight. That's another thing to check on your engine, guys, before you run them. I guess I should have, but quite a few things were loose on this thing. Raise that rod up a little bit, get that out of the way, and fish this thing through. There we go. Now I'll have to cut that off and keep that because I'll have to stick that back through the block. And whoa, full stop. Yep, it's heading. We're gonna have to have some clearance work up here at the top of the block for sure. Let's see if I can get it up here where you guys can see. Oh, man, that light. Hopefully you can see that. Bang, yeah. Oh, that's a hard hit right there. Spin it around, see what it does. Does it clear the bottom? It's clearing the bottom. It's really, really tight. I mean, it's tight. So that bottom's going to have to be clearance too. But that top is, man, just a complete, it's a dead stop. Bang. Out. Get the crank out of the way. Can't see. Okay. Yeah, it's making it through. Dang, man, that light. I'm sorry, guys. I will try to remember that next time, how much that light really washes out on the camera. Yeah, that's a direct hit there. That's not going to work. Quite a bit of material's got to come out of that thing too. I'm glad we've got a thick block to work with. Yeah, that piston is definitely above the deck. And I had already measured this thing, guys, and forgot to put... I'm going to show you what I did. I pulled the side cover back off and everything, but I'm going to show you the piston on this rod and piston combo on my block was 8 thousandths above the deck. So I had 8 thousandths pop up. Now that means I'm going to run probably a 45 thousandths thick head gasket on mine. And that's normally a little bit more than I wanted to run, but that's okay because, you know, after looking at this crank, I'm pretty sure it's soft and it's going to flex at higher RPM. And all I'm doing here, I'm just kind of marking on the block, and man, I wish you guys could see this. I'm so sorry about that light. What I'm doing, I just got a Sharpie here and I'm marking down there on the block, and I try to get it here where I can show you a little better. And just this dark area here, that's where it's hitting over there. So I'm going to have to take some off all the way across the block. And the other side as well is going to have to come out. Now I've ground some and washed this thing out. Got all the shavings out of there and took it outside and sprayed it off with a hose. And man, it's 20-some degrees outside right now. So this is just some carb cleaner, just kind of to dry any residual moisture I have left on the block here, because your cylinder will flash rust if you get any water on it. And I'm going to go ahead and wipe this out a little bit, but just spoiler alert, we're getting kind of long on this video, guys. And as it turned out, I couldn't go any further right here anyway, because even though I did grind quite a bit, it is still stopping up there at the top of the block, and I have to grind off some more. And since this is running kind of long, man, we're over half an hour, and I apologize. We're going to end this one here, and I'll finish part 3 within the next couple of days. I should have the video uploaded Tuesday or Wednesday. And, you know, if you guys like this content, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell so you'll be notified when part 3 comes out. And we appreciate you watching. I'll also list in the description the carb I'm going to be running. I'm going to add a 26mm Mikuni clone, and also a 2-stage long tube header to go with this rascal. And they're reasonably priced. I found them right on Amazon. So I think it'll be a real good addition to this little project we got going. As always, guys, I appreciate you hanging out with me, and we'll see you next time.